Hey friends, my name is Roger Reinert, and I'm your host today for Good Talk. You know, one of the things that I absolutely love about calling Duluth home is that we are a big small town. And there are all sorts of things that happen all around us every day that we know something about, but we don't know a lot about. And so the goal of our podcast is to delve more deeply into those topics. The services, the people, the events, the activities that make this such an amazing place to live, work, and call home. So thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to a great conversation, and we'll dive right into the next one. Well, hey everyone, thanks for being back with us again for another edition of Good Talk. Today we have with us Josh Miller with the North Shore Scenic Railroad. Super excited to get to hear more of your story, Josh. Talk a little bit about the railroad, lots of questions about things you have going on, your favorite parts of the collection, if you will. I have a favorite car I'm going to ask you about,
Sure.
But why don't we start just by talking a little bit about, like, what's your story?
Sure.
We all have our origin story, right?
Right. Well, thanks for having me on, Roger.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
I grew up in White Bear Lake, north of St. Paul, and television was kind of a passion of mine. We did like a Wayne's World sort of a show in high school, me and my friends. But
For those of you maybe not our generation,
Right,
it was a
right.
very funny show.
it was a very popular show about public access is what it was about. But my whole life, trains were the other passion.
Oh,
And so after high school, we did 200 live episodes of this TV show that I did in high school, and I went off to St. Cloud State.
200?
200 episodes of this public
Live.
access every Thursday in high school. You could find me at the public
So at
access
this point,
studio.
we're going to switch roles. Josh is going to take over because he's far better qualified than I am.
It was different times in the public access world, I guess. And I wanted to go to school in Duluth because I've always loved Duluth from family vacations ago. But the TV program was in St. Cloud, so that led me there. And then worked briefly in Minneapolis at WCCO at the CBS affiliate. And I remember the day an email popped into my inbox while I was running cameras one day from an alumni list from St. Cloud, and it said, "Director job open in Duluth."
Okay.
And I was like, at that moment, I knew I was moving to Duluth.
Oh, wow.
And I came up and I did a job interview at KBJR.
Okay.
Immediately left the job interview and went to the Railroad Museum, learned about the Railroad Museum and that they have this scenic railroad that has volunteer crews on it. And I thought this was going to work, got the job, moved here. And years later now I'm the station manager of the North Shore Scenic Railroad. And we operate the train excursions at the depot, and that got me here.
What is what is that structure at the, because it's kind of attraction, but it's sort of a museum.
Sure.
And like how many staff do you have, paid, volunteer?
Yeah, the Duluth Depot itself is actually kind of a complex with multiple organizations. There's
Right.
an art institute, there's the Veterans Hall, the Historical Society. The Lake Superior Railroad Museum is a tenant in that building.
Okay.
And the Railroad Museum is the parent company of the North Shore Scenic Railroad.
Okay.
Both are nonprofit organizations, and both work to support the Railroad Museum itself and its mission to preserve, present, and interpret the history of railroading as it relates to the area specifically.
Okay.
So the little bit that we get extra from the North Shore Scenic, railroading is very expensive, but the little bit extra there goes to support the
So is it
museum.
like, hey, I'm going to donate like this rolling stock to you, but oh, by the way, like it takes money to maintain and
Absolutely.
preserve and restore and
Yes, it's a great it's a great relationship in the sense that a railroad museum is a collection of stuff until you make new memories from it, and it's a way to bring the historic equipment to life for people. And then at the same time, we happen to have this beautiful lake and this beautiful track and all these other things that we can create this excursion element to it.
So the part that I think a lot of people know about is the road, right? The train that moves, the scenic tour. Is that about generating revenue to help support the rest of the museum? Is that like how the two fit together?
Absolutely. That's the specific relationship is the monetary support of the Railroad Museum. However, it's also the mission of the museum to interpret and present railroad history. So at the same time, you can do that with historic train cars that are live in action.
And then the rolling line, Duluth to Two Harbors, right? And then who I think most of the public wouldn't know, like who owns the
Track, yeah.
tracks
Sure.
and how does that get improved? And I know there was a bridge that was redone. And
Sure. And it's a great story about how all that came together. And the short version is that the county owns the property that the North Shore Scenic operates on,
Okay.
a 30-mile stretch of track. But it's a county organization in the sense that it's the St. Louis and Lake Counties Regional Rail Authority,
Sure.
government operation.
Okay.
And we're the exclusive operator on that railroad.
Okay.
And we have a great relationship, of course, with the county and operating and maintaining the track itself and the property and so on. So
Okay. So if track has to be replaced, if a bridge has to be redone, does that really come back? It comes back to the county
directly,
as the
yeah.
owners of the rail authority as the
Directly,
owners of
but
the
it's
track.
it's obviously a relationship in the
Okay.
sense that a small portion of every train ticket goes to the county for that support and other
As we think trains and like train related news lately is about Northern Lights Express, is there a connection at all? And like none?
no direct relationship. My boss Ken, he's on the committee for
Mm-hmm.
that. The lobbying committee for the Northern Lights Express. At the time, there's no official relationship with the Scenic Railroad or anything. Where the stations will be and all that stuff is still to be determined. So.
Okay. But potentially if there's a connection at the depot, then like it won't hurt, right? Like, more people will be interested probably in trains.
More trains are always good.
Trains are always, if there's one thing to take away, friends, more trains are always good.
The relationship there is still to be determined as far as how that would go. Obviously, we would work with, I don't think the frequency of trains for the Northern Lights Express would necessarily interrupt the North Shore Scenic
Yeah,
Railroad.
because you're point north and
Right.
that okay.
So they'd come in, turn around, and go back,
Yeah.
and so on. But
So I think a lot of people, two kind of lines of questions, Josh. One is just sort of the inventory, if you will, of the museum.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll ask you also about, I know there's a lot of kind of key annual events that people connect the railroad with. So what is in the exhibit stock? Like if someone were to come to the museum, and you were able to personally show them something, what are some of the highlights?
sure. The Lake Superior Railroad Museum this year is celebrating our 50th anniversary. So 1973, they put the very first pieces of equipment in the museum, and some of the elders who were there to start building it talk about how they thought they had so much space, so they did this, and then they had so much space because they had to fill this, and now we're packed to the brim.
Yeah.
Our train yard is full of historic equipment, and we have an incredible
Inside and out, right?
Absolutely, it's
Yeah.
inside and out. There's like the shiny indoor stuff, and then the outdoor stuff, which I think the real train buffs would really enjoy. And there is, it's a great collection of equipment. I'd say about a third of it is operational in the sense that we run it and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Inside the museum, we have the very first train engine in Minnesota. I mean, I think every day about how amazing that is that it still exists.
Wow.
The first train in Minnesota, when that concept of having a train as infrastructure was new.
Right.
1860, and
Right.
Up until then, you're taking horses and
Right.
buggies and things, and
Yeah.
it's a different time. So we can connect those two dots, and then there's so many stories in between.
Okay.
Throughout the path of time.
And I know one of the locomotives, or there's a bud car that like drives itself.
Yeah.
I mean, that might be something a lot of people have been on, because I know sometimes that'll take you to the start of a race, whether it's like, remember a 5K that used to start kind of
sure.
up the shore a little bit, or grandma's and
Yeah, we have a wide variety of equipment. That's a train car that can self-operate and things like
Okay.
that. It's unique because we can find a use for this equipment.
yeah.
And the bread and butter really is the tourism industry, the North Shore Scenic Railroad. We do about 80 to 100,000 people a year,
Okay.
and you have to have a wide variety of options for people to come and ride and experience the railroad.
And I know that was a question I wanted to ask you in the research I was doing before we talked today. I saw a peak of maybe about 110,000 right before the pandemic. How did COVID impact the North Shore Scenic Railroad?
Yeah, so about 2018-ish was a record year for us. I think a lot of things were we're chugging along on the right track at that time in terms of volume and body count on the railroad.
Yeah.
The tank engine event is a huge event that we do, and there's about 15 to 20,000 people, and that can have a huge impact on
Just for that.
the body count. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's huge, and its brand itself was probably at its peak in 2018.
Sure.
And I think that helped a lot with those numbers. I think Duluth was in a economic beneficial place there.
Yep.
We also had some really unique operations going on, like the steam locomotive was running and stuff. We know about 20% of our riders specifically come to Duluth because they're coming to ride the train.
Okay.
So I think that's a really great number, and that's a huge number of people that are just coming just for the train part.
Sure.
And then the rest, are people here in town and looking to fill their time, and so you have to capture those, that group.
And did you have to pause? Did you have to cease operations during the pandemic? And then what was it like to move out of that?
So nonprofit seasonal operations are really good at going, super light.
Okay.
And if there's nothing convenient about COVID, but if timing wise, we were already kind of in our seasonal shutdown.
Sure.
So we went ultra light. The depot was shut down, and there was only 3 of us operating the whole Duluth Depot building because we did have some business operations still going, essential stuff. We make money storing freight cars in the wintertime, for example, and so that business had to continue. But Ken and I started this YouTube series during COVID, and we did 1 video a day about different equipment in the museum.
Okay.
That was only supposed to go for a week.
Okay.
And 125 videos later, we became monetized on YouTube. We still make a few dollars with our YouTube series, and we have a video about every piece of equipment in our museum.
Wow.
So we did this about 4 hours per video. We made these this production, and they were little 5-minute clips,
Okay.
about every single piece in our collection.
Okay.
And that's how we filled the time during YouTube or during COVID.
Yeah.
But where that actually connects after the pandemic, it's interesting still to this day, 3 years later, there are people who coming in, traveled all the way here from Australia. I watched your YouTube series, got me through the pandemic. I watched every single day, and they come in to shake hands with us and tell us that they came just for that. And it happens regularly. I think 21 and 22 it was a couple times a week at least. There was somebody from far away coming to see us. So
because they saw because they saw the videos you did during COVID.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So that's kind of what got us through that.
Okay.
And then of course, we started up 2020, light like everybody else in the halves, but the demand came right back, I think.
Okay.
After that.
I mean, we saw a lot of that with attractions, right? And so I was curious if that was true with train or if there were people that were sensitive about enclosed spaces. And
it really wasn't. I mean, we were filling trains when we were half capacity.
Yeah.
We took all those precautions, of course.
Of course.
But it was fascinating to me how fast everybody was ready to bounce back in terms of, Duluth is one of those unique locations. Obviously, we're pulling for the Minneapolis-St. Paul demographic.
Yeah.
And, even in like high gas price times when people aren't traveling, Duluth still does kind of okay because, we're close.
Right.
But then even in good times, everything's great in the economy and people are traveling, well, Duluth still does pretty okay. So, the key is bringing those families to those hotel rooms and looking for something to do and experience.
And with the Scenic Railroad as sort of a foundational partner of our tourism industry, like you said, 20% of your guests come just to do that.
Absolutely.
Yep. So as tourism recovered, you saw that recovery as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. We haven't bounced back to that record year of 2018, I think, and that was based on body count itself. I think it's hard to compare yourself to previous years when pricing changes and money and things like that. But I'm still very optimistic for another record year. We're about 12% over last year in terms of reservations. We do have I'm a numbers guy, so we have a unique ability to pull numbers in different ways. We can look at sales and the people who have ridden up into this date.
Okay.
But we can also look at reservations of all the people who are booking ahead.
Yeah.
And kind of look in that crystal ball for, what is the year going to be like in general. And, this particular year, January, February, I was like, we're like 70% ahead of where we should be.
Oh, really?
That's a number I can share because people were booking in advance this year.
Okay.
And that's obviously gone down now to about 12%.
Yeah.
But I was fascinated by the fact that, January, February, this harsh winter we had, people were thinking of the summer. And we can.
That is optimism.
And it's really fun to do that. At 11 o'clock at night in my home office, I can be clicking around and finding those numbers and kind of discovering those little things that the numbers can tell you. I think it's fun stuff that,
what
I
is
enjoy.
throughout the season, I personally am like, oh, the fall. Like, I love riding the train in the fall colors. I mean, is there what does that seasonal flow look like for the railroad? And does it change between riding and the museum?
Yeah. The museum stays pretty steady. It's very consistent. It obviously has a direct relationship with the railroad. Mm-hmm. You come to ride the train, you get half off admission for the museum.
Sure.
And it's pretty consistent to follow along with the excursions. But, when I first started at the railroad 15 years ago, September and October that's the end of the year. Now it's the peak of the year.
Okay.
By far.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
September has now taken over as the new peak of the season.
Oh, interesting.
August has more operations in the sense of more physical trains moving, more physical bodies moving.
Yeah.
But September draws a whole new crowd, and the fall.
Is that a fall colors?
Fall tourists, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. There's a whole new demographic that happens in the fall.
Okay. And I know throughout the year the railroad is very intentional about different events, activities. You mentioned Thomas the Train. I think of like the Great Pumpkin, also a fall thing. I mean, what are some of those that are really highlights that if people haven't done, you would encourage them to do?
Sure. Well, Thomas the Tank Engine is an annual event that we have. Again, it's 15 to 20,000 people. It's a huge event for us. It's always been at the Duluth Depot, but this year we're moving into two harbors on the other end of the line.
Okay.
As something to just try differently.
Okay.
One component of the Thomas event is that we have to cancel our regular operations. So our regular rides and the first class dome cars and things like that are actually parked, during Thomas, because it's very specifically a kid-oriented event. There are different rules about how you can operate.
Yeah.
So we're moving into two harbors in this beautiful location up there along the lake, right at the Two Harbors Depot there. It's gorgeous.
Okay.
And we're able to continue our operations at the Railroad Museum.
Oh, okay.
So you can do a little bit of both. And, the Thomas ride itself is like a 20-minute ride, good for kids. Some people want a little longer ride, so they will come down to Duluth and do both.
Yeah.
And I think it will work out really well.
Yeah.
And then the pumpkin train you mentioned is one of my favorite weekends of the whole year. It's the fall colors.
Yeah.
It's the fall colors peak after the peak.
Yeah.
And that's actually like the really fun part, because that's like when the cool locals come out.
Yeah.
And they're finally kind of experiencing, the late October season. So.
And I know in years past there's been Northern Polar Express,
Christmas City Express. So years ago, it's about 7 or 8 years ago, we actually wrote our own book, The Christmas City Express, about Duluth.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
And that's really fun because we've sort of franchised that off too. It's a book about a girl going to visit her grandparents on Christmas. The snowstorm takes over, and they have to save Christmas, her and the conductor, and there's a special guest who appears and so on. It's this book that we created, and we perform it for visitors.
Yeah.
But we're also able to kind of change where that little girl's going to into your city here. And there's several other railroads across the country who now operate our Christmas City Express.
Oh, no kidding.
book. Yeah. So
wow.
It's something I'm very proud of that we accomplished, and kind of created our own unique thing that doesn't have to compete with a Warner Brothers movie.
Oh, well done. And then, I mean, just from a business model standpoint, there's some licensing or revenue as you move this model out into other railroads and museums.
Exactly. It's
awesome.
It's a very very slow going thing,
Okay.
but it's a fun new endeavor for us.
So what do you see as the arc of the museum and the North Shore Scenic Railroad over the next 5 years? What are you really excited about, and what maybe are some of the challenges?
Mm-hmm. Well, railroading is an extremely expensive thing, as I mentioned, and crewing and certifications and things like that are some of our biggest challenges by far. The Federal Railroad Administration is always making new safety guidelines that we have to follow, and I think that's good. Safety is good, right?
Safety is good. Yeah.
But that can be challenging with limited resources.
Sure.
And we have a volunteer trained crew and then paid staff who operate the railroad, and we have to keep growing with that. And meanwhile, I think I'm optimistic for Duluth's tourism industry. I'm optimistic for our operation. Another great thing that came out of the pandemic, if I can tell you about, we took a chance that the pandemic would end, and we purchased a full-length dome car. And the railroad very rarely ever purchases anything. Okay. We acquire historic artifacts and train cars and things. Yep. But we purchased from a liquidation sale a full-length dome car. It's called the Skyview Dome. Okay. 85 feet of beautiful dome glass. It was in really great condition. There's 66 seats upstairs with this downstairs that has bathrooms and a kitchen and a generator. It's a huge car, and we operate our first class cabin service out of it. Wow. We can do dinner trains because it's got tables and so on. The history behind it was in 1951. The Santa Fe Railway builds these as kind of a marketing ploy, and it's a cool spot to ride and so on. I went on to ride on the Alaska Railroad, and the Alaska Railroad made so much operating these full-length dome cars that they just built new ones and they got themselves out of the Heritage Railroad business because they're in the cruise line business. Okay. And so they built brand new ones, eventually sold them off, and now it's a part of our collection. And it's something I'm very proud of our organization for taking a chance on, because the bank, the bank that provided this loan for us to make this possible said that they've never really seen a business plan work out quite that well. Okay. It's just such an integral part of our business that providing the first class service for our guests creates a whole new element of our business. We buy $50,000 a year in charcuterie. Wow. To give you an idea of how it works into the business.
So for folks that are listening, if they want to rent this for a special event, that's kind of...
It's such a great space for, 60 people. I mean, you have a 50-person event. You go on the Skyview Dome car. You have your own little private space upstairs, and it's gorgeous. And there's a kitchen downstairs for the below deck folks to work down there and get your food and drinks ready and come up, and it's great. Wow. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's a huge thing that came out of the pandemic, and that will work into our business going forward, as the NLX tourist coming up here on the train from the cities. They don't want to sit in a coach again. They just rode in a coach. So we have to create new experiences like that. Right. That can still find a niche and provide
But in there, I hear confidence about the future of the railroad. I hear like we're going to make investments that'll help us provide new experiences and generate additional revenue.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And like I say, just things like the dome car are like that. We'll explore the new Thomas tank engine this year, moving to two harbors and be able to operate two different things at once. For us, I mean, we're an organization of about 8 full-time employees that run a nonprofit business that has about 100,000 people that we have to take care of and hold their hands throughout their reservation process all the way to their ride and their survey that they get afterwards and so on. And then we have about 30 seasonal staff that come on, and then about 80 or so volunteers that make it
now, if someone was interested in volunteering, is that a possibility? What's their first step?
Absolutely. Well, contacting us, of course, we have a form on our website and things like that. Volunteers range from all different kinds of things. The Thomas event, there's the person at the bounce house making sure, kids are safe jumping around. But there's also those who are going through 160 hours, I think, this year to become a certified conductor. Okay. I mean, it's not the... just show you how to do it, and then you can go out there and work the railroad. I mean, this is.
So I can't come tomorrow and drive the train. That's what you're saying.
It
feels like one of those safety things. So.
Exactly. Yes, and it takes so much time, but those rules are important in the safety, of course. And there's such a commitment. It's fun to get to know people who are that passionate about trains. It's in your blood, or it's not.
Yeah. And, cool.
Yeah.
Well, one question before I let you go. I want to ask about my favorite car that I've seen in your collection, and it's this amazing, historic, my recollection is all metal, but looks like wood paneling kind of executive car. I've had meetings in that car before. It's been Ken Bueller, who you mentioned, showed it to me years ago. Do you know the car I'm talking about? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about it?
I do. It's the car Northland, and it is by far the treasure of the Lake Superior Railroad Museum's collection. It's from the Duluth, Mesabi and Iron Range, right up there in Proctor, is where it's on home territory.
Okay.
And it's this beautiful private train car for
I would say luxurious.
very luxurious,
Yeah.
of the president of the railroad. If you're the president of any railroad, still to this day, you have some perks of your job. You get a fleet of train cars, and if you were the president of the Duluth, Mesabi and Iron Range, likewise. And they built this train car completely out of steel.
Okay.
Because we know what the Duluth, Mesabi and Iron Range carries,
Right.
taconite, and
Yeah.
makes steel.
Yep.
But they realized,
And that was a thing, right? We want it to be out of the material that we make money on, right?
absolutely. But the steel didn't look so good, so they had it painted with turkey feathers, and you can look at the wood grain in this car and absolutely be convinced it's wood.
Yeah.
But then you bang on it and you get metal.
Yeah, I mean, folks, this is worth the price of admission. I mean, you go, oh, this you think it's wood, and then someone tells you it's not, and you have to touch and go, oh wow,
Indeed.
It is not. It is stunning.
Yeah, and the car Northland is a part of the Railroad Museum's collections on display daily. So
Okay.
yes, people can come and see it. It also goes out about 10 times a year. It's operable.
Okay.
It runs on the North Shore Scenic, and I always tell people, it's a couple $1,000s to charter, if you want to have a private event or whatever.
Yep.
But most of the time it leaves for free because we still use the car to its home advantage the same way investors and presidents of railroads used to use it, because we can entertain guests on board, for various presentations, you will, and that's usually what it goes for, is things like that, and it's still being used the way it was intended to be used, to entertain guests and also do some business on the side. So.
Yeah, and I think not only have I seen it in the museum, but that reminds me, I do think I've had a chance to ride in it during an inspection tour, which is kind of the railroad bringing lots of different stakeholders together and getting to be on the train and have lunch and just sort of see it doing its thing.
That's right. The inspection train is an annual tradition of every railroad. We'll do one once a year, and the inspection usually has mostly to do with, having a nice lunch.
Yeah,
and
just for the
enjoying each
public's
other's company.
assurance, we're not inspecting anything. Like the pros do that. It's,
Right.
it's more about being on the train and having lunch and like being impressed by the train doing what it's supposed to do.
And we invite once a year some VIPs from the area, area leaders,
Yep.
and that's who gets invited to that particular luncheon for the annual inspection train. But it's a great story going back to James J. Hill, the Empire Builder, and everybody would get that glass of water to watch its tip and its bubbles and move, how it moves, to make sure that they had the most solid track and the most even level,
fascinating.
tampered track that is, so
Fascinating.
there was an inspection element to it, not quite what we think of as inspection. But
Well, Josh, thanks for being with us today. I think rail is such an important part of American history. It's such an important part of Duluth's history. Our story of how we became a major community and continue to be. So folks that want to ride the train or visit, what's their best step? Find you online, call a number.
Yeah, DuluthTrains.com. We got a great website that can escort you to whichever direction. If you're looking for Thomas, or you're looking for an elegant dinner train, or going on the beer tasting train, you will find your path.
Or renting a private car. So.
Or renting a private car. That can be done too.
All
and
right.
So,
Josh Miller with the North Shore Scenic Railroad. Thanks for
Roger.
being with us today.
Thanks so much.
Great talk.
yes, thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us today. You've been listening to Good Talk. I'm your host, Roger Reiner, and we look forward to having you with us for our next conversation.